Hello, everyone. My name is Nipul Chokshi, and I'm VP of Marketing here at Dun& Bradstreet. Thank you for joining us for our session today, The Future of ABM, Three Keys to Accelerating Growth in 2021. Before we get started, I wanted to just cover a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, as we will be reserving a portion of the webinar at the end to answer audience questions. And so with that, I'm super excited to have our guest speaker today, Ben Coffey. He's a demand gen leader at LiveRamp. He'll be talking about the LiveRamp story in terms of how they are accelerating growth using digital tactics and account-based marketing. And there's some great learnings here indeed. But before I turn it over to Ben so that he can recount his story, I wanted to just set a little bit of context. Next slide. It's no surprise to everyone that digital interactions are more critical than ever when it comes to brands engaging with buyers. I found this quote to be really amusing from the CEO of Microsoft, where he mentioned that in the last 2 months we've seen 2 years worth of digital interactions. There was also a similar study done by McKinsey where they found that in surveying B2B sales and marketing leaders, they found that digital interactions were twice as important as before, kind of all the situation with COVID and current times. And so with that, next slide. It's almost like the urgency and the need with which we need to transform marketing so that we are more targeted, more relevant, has just increased, especially recently. This shouldn't be any shock, but the adoption of account-based marketing has substantially increased, just partly in response to kind of these trends around driving more relevant, more insightful interactions with our buyers. Next slide. And so by leveraging account-based marketing strategies and tactics, companies are driving impact for sure. They are seeing almost 60% increase in terms of engagement rates with their target accounts. They are driving as marketers, driving a bigger impact for their business in terms of higher pipeline and increasing pipeline growth for their companies. And so ultimately at D&B, I have the great fortune of working with some of the smartest marketing leaders out there, our customers who are leveraging these tactics. And if you had to boil down kind of the 3 things that they did in order to drive success with their ABM program, here are those 3 things, right? They all kind of at some level or another did some measure of segmentation to really identify who are the top targets that sales and marketing jointly should be pursuing so that they can achieve their pipeline and revenue objectives for the company. Then to be able to activate and engage those accounts across a variety of different channels using various different tactics in a very synchronous, orchestrated way. And then lastly, to be able to measure constantly, to be able to see what's working and what's not. And so just as context, that's kind of what we've observed across our customers. And so what I want to do now is turn it over to Ben, who is part of LiveRamp. They're a D&B customer. And I just wanted to have him walk through their story around how they're able to drive value with their account-based marketing programs. So Ben, welcome, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Nipul. Loved the introduction. Spot on with where we're at in account-based marketing. So I'm really happy to be here today. And let me just start by giving you a little background about me. Been in tech for about a decade, had roles in sales, marketing, and kind of always gravitated to ops. So my foot in the door was sales operations, which eventually got me into a marketing team and marketing ops. And since then, it's been a really exciting career to follow. I've got one kid, she's 2.5 years old, and like she's gonna figure out all of these problems that I'm never gonna be able to solve. Pretty inspiring. What is LiveRamp? So you may have heard of LiveRamp. We are the world's leading data connectivity platform. So customers work with us because they get interoperability that lets them connect their data to collaborate with partners, create richer audiences, more meaningful experiences, all of the stuff we're talking about here today. So we are delivering best-in-class customer-centric experiences, building customer journeys based on data, linking in-store transactions, online, offline, and helping marketers demonstrate effective ROI for outcome-based measurement. We take extreme precautions when it comes to data governance, privacy, security, and this means LiveRamp enables companies and partners to better connect, control, activate, and transform their data into customer experiences that generate better outcomes. So we've been doing ABM since I started here. This was over 5 years ago. I'd say probably a good 6 years. Account-based marketing has been like a key strategy at LiveRamp. So Nipul talked a little about segmenting, engaging, measuring. I think there's also the strategy and consideration of which channels will also attract your new business, your new persons. So where did we start at LiveRamp? In the early days, we looked for signals. Where were we beginning to see wins? Where were we not? This kind of helped us get a good understanding of what some relevant demographic or online or intent-based measures could help us build a list. We established a target account list as early as 2014. It's gone through so many iterations since then. And I think that's really like the point and the story that I'm here to talk about is like keeping pace with all of the evolutions, all of the changes, all of the, list enhancements, reductions, growth, and being able to really accommodate a business that's moving from like new business as a primary focus to upsell, cross-sell, and really growing our customer accounts. So a few years ago was when I think I ran into one of the hairier ABM problems I've uncovered, which was like this concept of hybrid audiences. So for LiveRamp, our target accounts are, they comprise of like 5 general ecosystems. The one I'm going to talk about right now are the brands. And within brands, like we've always had a pretty good idea of like what it means to be a good fit brand, how many employees or like how much annual revenue, like what kind of industry, what kind of technologies are they using, how much traffic are they getting. And then all of a sudden, in upsell cross-sell mode, brands became more than like one thing. And so now we've got brands that are B2B brands or B2C brands or the different business groups within a brand that like are interested in, emerging growth initiatives like advanced TV. So I sat on this for a while, but we had to get back to the basics. And so this is all about like designing systems that allow us to do account-based marketing, but also personalizing to the actual like persona level within each account. So when I go out and I talk about like how we're organizing our audiences, like I go back to the basics and I make sure we're like on the same page no matter who I'm talking to. ABM also means something different to many different audiences. Account-based marketing might mean one thing to a sales leader than to a marketing leader. So I think it's always important to level set and just clarify, like, what is this? So it's pretty clear now at LiveRamp how we organize around this. Like when we're planning and designing our campaigns, like the questions that we ask are around like understanding the types of companies or the specific named accounts or whatever it is, right down to the person and the role. So this was like one critical step toward overcoming the challenge of this hybrid account where like you can be more than one thing at a time, and that's okay. Marketers don't like that kind of overlap. So early ABM, like we're about the 5 audiences. Sophisticated ABM means we're verticalized and actually going horizontal across our vertical audiences and defining marketing audiences within and across. So at LiveRamp, our audiences like advanced TV and like privacy manager or B2B, like they will span many different verticals. And for a long time, that limited our effectiveness for how we could personalize account-based marketing and achieve the most optimal engagement. So by addressing this and beginning to stamp an audience on a person and decouple like the relationship of that person from the accounts on purpose because you've gone through a ranked tiering exercise to make sure they get the best fit audience, it makes sense for us now. And what this enables is more sophisticated advertising audiences that like are portable from top of funnel to bottom of funnel. So this is an example of a commercial vertical audience, that's what I'm calling it, where we have like similar themes, similar content, some hybrid accounts. And on the left, you're looking at like the campaign personalized for a brand. And on the right, you're looking at personalized for the publishers. And I think amidst like all of the challenges that like have been present since the pandemic stricken world has come upon us, the fact that we're doing focused, targeted, account-based marketing in a relevant and personal way, like we're still seeing traction and results in the ways we want to. So here's another example. So these are some hybrid verticals where I'm actually talking about like a publisher audience topic with the brands and the tech and the publisher's audience. So this is tapping into our person level audience info. If you are like the kind of person that should be in a TV business group buying center, you've got some common attributes that we'll look for, or you're downloading certain things. We're learning and listening about like how people engage and what we know about them. And our segment is always trying to give a best fit audience. And so like the result is what you're looking at here. We can have like really compelling advertising creative talking to different people at the same account about the same thing in the best way. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about our measurement tactics now. For me, measurement is something that must be considered like probably even before the campaign like planning itself starts. Otherwise, it's always a game of catch up. So ensuring that you've got like the right systems and attribution mechanisms and processes in place like before you launch is like so paramount. I'm telling you because I've experienced it the hard way too. So when we think about our channels, like it's the channels of investment, right? So we invest in field marketing events. This is now also virtual events. And then there's industry trade, like our publisher direct. Email is a big investment of time, but maybe not as much as like a marketing spend investment, but still we want to be able to see the responses that it's driving. Our paid and programmatic channels are also measured, and like we group those by our sources. Like and we look at paid social versus paid search and kind of understand where in the funnel we want to tweak our investments based on what we're seeing. It can all be very confusing. And so I think it's also important to equip stakeholders and people on our marketing teams with like simple ways to talk about what we're doing well. So I use these things called touch points. Nobody knows what a touch point is. Like, help people understand that these are campaign responses and that like the things that we're measuring are actually the outcomes that we intended to achieve. So this is an example of like a slide I used to kind of talk about like more of our like awareness and like site analytics and like how are we doing to like drum up excitement from like new audiences versus like intent for us is like, well, this person responded. Like, that's a good signal. So how does that actually look in terms of stuff that gets measured? For us, when it comes to top of funnel, we're looking at standard awareness metrics like your impressions, CPM, CPC, click-through rates. Engagement, I think what I find to be most effective is just kind of looking at your year over year or month over month trends. And of course, like how much pipeline. Whether it's sourced by or influenced in a multi-touch model, can you attribute back to that touch point? When it comes to mid-funnel, so this is like our known audience. Mid-funnel is about lead generation, it's about movement to MQL, it's about conversion into pipe, which would be the bottom of the funnel. So things we measure, things that we look at and benchmark and ensure are tracking in the right direction would be net new leads. What are they sourced by? How many of them meet the MQL threshold? How many are getting meetings? And how many make it to qualified? I think it's really important to have these metrics at hand, available, and also standard. I've lived in a world where ad hoc reports are the norm, and there's just no way to get ahead of it there. So by equipping people with like tools that help them organize the digests in a relevant way for them, it can be very helpful. For example, when we publish dashboards, like the filters that we give people at the dashboard level are about organizing different groups. So sourced by, was it sourced by marketing or sales? That's a very useful way to like segment out a digest of your performance because it allows a person to see what they contributed if they own sourced by for that group, right? Similar vertical would be another way, like our commercial teams organized around vertical, the output in terms of pipeline performance should also be. So when it comes to measuring the bottom funnel, there's a few ways to get there. I think a lot of us are probably aware of like the lead source, like first touch sourced by attribution. I think it's important to have like a variety of tools in your box. So we've recently started talking about multi-touch. The model we decided to use is W-shape. And really this just means we're looking at your top, mid, and bottom funnel campaign responses, the things that happen in closest proximity to those achievements in the customer's life cycle. And different kinds of channels and different kinds of campaigns and tactics are more or less important in each stage of the funnel itself. So it really gives precision level measurement to understand channel contribution for your ABM campaigns. And then finally, like there's also things that aren't the funnel. Like let's talk about our database. It's important to like maintain and ensure you have good audience health. How many names are you adding? By vertical, by persona, by role? Like how many of them are marketable? How do your audience cohorts look? Like how are people moving through the funnel? Do you have any constraints? So I think being proactive in these ways and looking at your conversion rates and knowing where you want to like increase or decrease scoring thresholds, like that's how you make like a real change with like minimal input. And you get there by like looking at digests of audience health performance. Account-based marketing has been extraordinarily successful strategy for LiveRamp to employ. It's really helped our teams focus on the most important accounts. With it comes a lot of responsibility around maintaining alignment with your sales leadership and counterparts, but it's worth the squeeze because we're seeing, for example, greater reach. We have campaigns where we're using signals that help us get 33% higher engagement. When we tune an outbound teleprospecting campaign around real-time intent signals, people respond better. And finally, when we're passing MQLs that are always good fit named accounts, they convert better. We've seen 200% increase in MQL conversion rates when ABM tactics are employed. Lessons learned. I talked about my hybrid accounts, like think proactively about where there's going to be overlap and when it makes sense and when it doesn't. I talked about the dashboard filters, like think about your business groups. Who are the people that need to see this stuff and how can I make a dynamic view that scales with minimal input? And finally, like think about your data management. For us, like enterprise transformation has been really helpful for us to manage duplicates, like enrichment. There's so many systems these days, you know, plugged into your CRM that things can get very messy. And my bit of wisdom as a marketing ops professional would be nobody else is going to do it for you. So take the proactive steps to manage your audience in those ways. And that's a wrap. Wow, went by so fast. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And I'm really glad to share any insights that I have about what's worked and what hasn't. And I'll turn it back to Nipul, who will help us with any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. I think that's a great story and some great insights there indeed. I love the kind of how you thought about ABM in terms of, kind of targeting the right accounts and aligning around those, kind of figuring out the best ways to attract them into your funnel to kind of convert them, and then measure what works and what doesn't. So great framework, that you guys are leveraging there, and ways to think about it. I see a lot of questions coming in. The first question here is from Rebecca. She asks, so she's basically asking again, like as having done kind of early and sophisticated ABM, how are you guys thinking about priorities in terms of expanding your ABM programs in 2021 to support your growth objectives?
This has been a tremendously uprooting experience of a year, and I think 2021 is the year when we're going to have to make sense of it all. So this year has been experimenting. It's been figuring out what's going to work in the new world. And so I think next year, this is all about tying it together. It's not going to be the same world that we lived in. But I think there's some things we can anticipate, like probably our events will always have a virtual component to them now. So I think getting a head start on like how technology and systems fit in is super important. Like for me, this came out in, events being such a big part of our strategy. Like the shift from in-person to virtual makes a very big difference on day of logistics and the capacity for a commercial team to organize and engage around that audience while they're tuned in to a thing on their computers. So I think just completely reimagining what it means to deliver engagement insights to our sales counterparts for our events, no matter whether they're in person or virtual, is going to be super critical for businesses like ours.
That's great. That's great. And following on that, this next question comes from Katie. So it's more, so I loved your early ABM, sophisticated ABM. She says, kind of the way you think about it. Can you talk a little bit more about, what falls into early ABM versus sophisticated ABM and how you generally think about that as part of your marketing strategy?
Yeah, definitely. I think early ABM for me means maybe you have your list, and maybe this is what your sales team is after, but maybe you're not quite there yet, and you don't want to close the door to people that may be interested and want to pay, right? I think as our organization has matured, we've been able to make sharper decisions about thresholds and what a customer really should be, and so in a mature organization, when those decisions can be fleshed out, then you can make automation implementations to handle moving leads to resellers that don't meet your internal thresholds. So mature ABM, I think, is about keeping pace with where the organization is growing into, and ensuring that you aren't losing the account-based capabilities that you had in the prior phase. These orgs will just keep on maturing, and so just listening and keeping pace, I think, is really important for the mature version of an account-based org.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I actually did a workshop with various customers on ABM last week, and this was something that kept coming over and over. Right, is all around kind of their ABM is really a journey, right? And there's always like a crawl, walk, and run component to it. And so, to your point, you want to kind of start with things that you think are achievable objectives up front, right? Like yourself, a lot of customers will start with just kind of aligning with sales on what are the target accounts, right? You mentioned earlier about, what's the ICP? You knew the ICP was all around like industry, employee size, but then in order to, be more precise and in order to make sure that you were more targeted, you kind of expanded that to include other sort of third-party signals and attributes, right? Technologies installed and so on and so forth. A lot of our customers also kind of do that, right? In terms of leveraging third-party signals, intent signals, for example, will help give a sense of what kind of interest they're exhibiting. One of
I
the,
think
sorry.
I think to that point too, when you're crawling and you're walking and you're running, like we cannot ever take for granted when you're running or flying.
Yeah,
Because by not paying attention and not keeping pace with like where ABM is headed, where your strategy is headed, like you will be walking again, and
right.
it can happen.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have another question here from Pat. It's more on the measurement side of things, which as marketers we're all kind of challenged with, and just in terms of understanding what's working and what's not, to be able to highlight the contribution that marketing is driving. He asks, what's a good starting point to understand the tactics and programs? Like, how do you get started with the measurement program? How did you guys do that?
I think start simple with measurement. So there's measurement is like out of the box in a lot of systems these days, but basic measurement is about where did the person come from? How did you get them? Was it from a campaign you invested in, or was it like an organic kind of inbound thing? And then like what captured them on your site or like at the thing that you went to. It's important to know those. That's your campaign and your lead source. And in aggregate, like, and when you design systems that like make data and responses like a lead source detail is, like that's portable and you can carry it through to pipeline. And that's an early way to start looking at the impact in terms of like we're marketing to the right people and we're bringing them in, and look, it's because like they're the ones buying, and here's the deal. So that is one of the simpler, more standard ways to measure. And from there, like make sure this is understood. And only once it is, like, do you move on to the next, and you can start talking about influence in multi-touch ways then.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. For us at DNB, we implement our own ABM program in a similar fashion. Like in terms of our measurement strategy, like when we first got started with the ABM program, it was like, let's just start identifying, who's engaging with us, like on dnb.com in terms of the campaigns, downloading webinar, attending webinars, downloading white papers, and just and just coming to our website and just being able to say, okay, let's identify which of those website visits are actually from target accounts. And that was kind of, at least for us, that was a good kind of crawl, if you will, before we started getting more sophisticated like you guys are doing, in terms of, driving to different types of attribution models and making smarter decisions around which campaigns are working and which campaigns aren't, and so on and so forth.
100%. I think you're right that web traffic in that way will help understand not only like what themes are resonating, but also like down to the exact account if like the tech is in place there. It's an excellent point.
Exactly. So it sounds like we've got time for one question. The last one here comes from Augustin. How do you scale personalization across your web experience and digital channels? You showed a couple of example ads earlier. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think personalizing like across channels can be a very overwhelming like thing to consider. The way we like actually accomplish it is like by keeping our audience and person stamps like portable and consistent. So like what I have seen happen is like personalizing but crisscrossing messages, because there aren't like governance and rules in place to like keep a consistent message for a certain period of time. So for us, personalizing is about like ensuring you have that continuity. I think where we have room to grow is like the dynamic personalization, for ad creative, is something that we're looking at and would love to be considering.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks. That's great. So we've got a whole bunch of other questions here, but I promise you folks, we will get back to you and follow up individually. We are at the, kind of at the end of the webinar here. Thank you all for attending. And Ben, thank you for spending your time to share the LiveRamp story. I definitely found it very insightful, and based on the questions that we're seeing, the audience did as well. So thank you again, and to everyone else, have a great day. Thanks.